Welcome back to the show, everyone. Jeff Hancher here, and I'm on a mission to help others lead, inspire, and win in this life. Tim Schurrer is the CEO of David Novak Leadership and also produces the How Leaders Lead podcast with David. He was also the right hand to Donald Miller for almost a decade as COO of StoryBrand, which many of you, if you listen to this show, you're familiar with that. During his time working at StoryBrand, as well as working at Tom's Shoes and at Apple under Steve Jobs, he discovered a secret society of people who taught him a new way to define success that maybe counters what current culture is selling us. For most people, success is within their grasp. They've just been maybe looking for it in all the wrong places. Tim's on a mission to give the roadmap to this. He's on a mission to give people the map because he believes everyone deserves a life and a career that they love. And this mission led him to author the book, The Secret Society of Success. He lives in Nashville, Tennessee with his wife, Katie, and their 2 children. And Tim, it has been amazing getting to know you before we hit record, and I'm honored to have you a part of this show.
Well, I'm pumped to be here. We've been talking for an hour. We haven't even hit record yet, which is great.
Really? I was just thinking, man, we should have hit record a long time ago. We could have done multiple segments on this. It has been amazing. And, when I started doing some research around it, obviously I've been following Donald Miller for years. I'm very familiar with David Novak. I used to work at a company that was a vendor for Yum Brands.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, wow, here we are making this connection. And I start to learn your story. And it's just unbelievable. It's amazing to see how things have accelerated for you and how things continue to unfold in your life. And I've had the opportunity to learn about your journey, and it's an amazing one, by the way. And when one point I read this article that said there was a time in your life that you wanted to follow the footsteps of John Mayer and become an artist in the music scene. But here you find yourself, settling for being the CEO, air quotes, with Donald Miller, and now the CEO of David Novak Leadership. I mean, can you give us a little background into this journey and this progression? Because it is absolutely amazing.
I wish you would have known me back then during the Tim wanted to be the next John Mayer phase of my life. My hair was beautiful. It was almost down to my shoulders. I mean, I was really going for it. But it ended up being one of my biggest failures, but one that I've learned so much from. A failure in that the thing that I set out to do didn't happen. And now being able to look back with some hindsight, I'm very, very grateful that it didn't happen, because I'm not sure if I would have found success as a musician that I would have been able to really live through that in a healthy way, because my mindset wasn't right. At that time, it was a goal to be famous. Like, I wanted people to know my name. I didn't set out to write songs and release records and do all of that to really help people. I wanted to be famous. And I just found, after chasing that way of living for several years, that's actually not the path to a meaningful life. And so I've been able to sober up from that idea, right? Like, I just have a much more grounded perspective, but it's what I've been learning over the last 15 years that has really helped me to do that and to gain that perspective.
Well, I mean, it goes without saying, you've heard it plenty, I've heard it plenty, and you're just sharing this story of failure. But I would also think that there's probably times that you and your wife are going on a walk at night and thinking about, wonder if I would have just kept pursuing the music thing to no avail. Mm-hmm. Like, how did that failure catapult you maybe into who you are today? Because I'm sure the people that are listening, we're all experiencing a level of failure. There's something to be said about failure. We've heard the stories of Elon Musk, who has failure quotas, like we need more failure so we can learn. What has failure taught you? And maybe the music thing is an example of that.
So someone who's been very influential for me is a guy named Michael Collins. And most people probably have no idea who Michael Collins is. But Most people probably do know about Apollo 11, man's first trip to the moon, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin. But Michael is a guy that was the third astronaut on that mission. His job, he Ubers Neil and Buzz to the moon, drops those guys off so they can do all that they have to do on the moon's surface. He stays back in the command module and orbits the moon 26 times until those guys are ready to be picked up and brought back to Earth. And if I am Michael, I'm probably feeling a little bit of resentment that I did all of the training to make it hundreds of thousands of miles to even be in that position and yet be like this close to making history, but I didn't get to do that, right? Neil and Buzz walked on the moon, made history. Michael's driving them there, right? But what I love so much about the story and why Michael has been such an inspiration is when he gets back to Earth and sits down with the press, he talks about how content he was to have had one of those 3 seats. The world that we live in today says to be successful, you need to be in the spotlight, climb the ladder, be the boss. It's almost like culture is saying, if you really want to be happy, you have to be the one walking on the moon. That was my perspective. That's what I needed and felt like I wanted in my life, trying to become the next John Mayer. But when that didn't work out for me and I made pivots, which ultimately led me to, for a decade, working with Don, in that season, it was the further and further that I got away from the spotlight, stepping into a behind-the-scenes role that I really felt fulfilled and momentum in my life and career. So there was a certain part of this cultural narrative that success is only this one thing that just didn't feel true because it's something I tried. It didn't work out. And in fact, success looked very different for me in this other direction. So that, I feel like, is the biggest thing that I learned from failure. It's what if I actually was looking for success in all the wrong places, and it's people like Michael Collins that have shown me a new way to live and a new way to define success. And it's this group of people that I write about in the book that I call the secret society of success. And one thing about this group is it has little to do with your position or how much visibility you have in your role. Like, the spotlight is actually not the problem. You can be a Tim Cook of Apple, one of the largest companies in the world, and be in the secret society. But you also can be somebody that nobody's ever heard of and be in the secret society. And the common denominator is this mindset and this posture of helping others win. And we all have the ability to step in that direction each and every day.
Yeah.
But that's just not that common in the world that we live in today. It feels a bit like swimming upstream.
Yeah, and sometimes it's void of accolades and void of the paparazzi and the fanfare. But like you were talking about, Michael Collins, there's a level of fulfillment that comes with that. It's like not everybody was even in the 3rd seat. And although I didn't get to put my foot on the moon's surface, I was a part of the team. There's a famous story, you've probably heard it, Tim. We're trying to get to the moon. So this would be months before your story. President Kennedy is visiting NASA. He's doing a tour to rally the troops. We got to be the first ones to the moon. And he sees a fellow over there, sweeping the floor, a janitor. And he takes time out of the tour and goes over to this gentleman to introduce himself. And he introduces himself as Jack. Hey, I'm Jack. I wanted to come over and thank you for what you do. Who are you? What do you do for us? And he said, my name's whatever his name is. And he said, I'm responsible to make sure that I do everything that I know to do to ensure that we get a man on the moon. And you want to talk about like somebody that has perspective. This is the janitor.
Yeah.
And like Michael Collins, although he didn't get a foot on it, he had perspective to say, you know what, maybe I don't need all the accolades. And I'm sure when they landed, he wasn't the first person that people wanted to talk to, but he had a part in that. And I think what you're saying is absolutely so true. And you probably experienced that as, Don built his brand. Matter of fact, I'd love to know maybe a little bit about that story, because I know there's listeners listening that are looking for that career progression and looking to grow. What was your, I introduced you as the former COO. I don't know if that was your first role with the company, but I got to imagine there was a progression. Like, can you maybe tell us about what that looked like? What were you doing when you first went into partnering with Don until, becoming the COO?
When I first started with Don, it was just he and I. So Don was writing books, speaking. He had a book at that time that he had written called A Million Miles in 1,000 Years, which ended up leading to hosting life planning conferences. And the big idea around that time was, in that book, it was all about living a better story with your life and using the elements of story. Like, how do they make movies, and how can we apply these same formulas to your life? What would that do? So for example, if we all went to a movie, and at the very end of the movie, the final scene, you see a guy driving off in a Volvo. Like, that was the climactic scene. Like, nobody's crying at the end of a movie when the guy worked his whole life to drive off in a Volvo. Like, that's not what makes for a meaningful story. It's also not what makes for a meaningful life. And so we were doing these life planning conferences around that time to have people think a little bit differently about how they show up. So it was Don and I. That was it. And then I feel like what my job was, what I love to do is, all right, Don, how can I free up more of your time to go and do what you do best, which is writing books and inspiring this thinking in all of us? Let me take care of as much as I can, take that off your plate. So in time, I ended up becoming his speaking agent. So when people would write in wanting to speak, I started negotiating those contracts, all the logistics, even to get him to those events. I was running and maintaining all of that. I'm a thought partner as we're like putting together what's the business strategy, how do we get more people to show up at our conferences. I was running all the logistics for pulling off that event. And over time, we started adding people, and everybody that we added just got added under me. And I was really running the day-to-day, allowing him to stay in that CEO visionary seat. And at a certain point in time, it makes sense to finally call it a certain title. I think at the beginning, I was like director of storyline, I think was my title, the first one. And then, as the company started to be more like a real company, I ended up taking on that COO role. And that's, kind of just how it went from that first employee that we hired to me hiring every single employee, growing that to a $16.5 million business over 10 years, and had a ton of fun getting to do that.
And a lot more employees, I'm sure, which creates a lot more challenges. And why I love going into this from a learning experience, get around people that have been where you want to go. You go from being employee number one to hiring every employee, after that. And by the way, hats off to you, Tim, because you had to progress. It wasn't just like your tenure allowed you to grow. Like, you had to grow with the company. It's like, we all went through growing pains growing up. It's painful, it hurts, but you got to keep going. You did that. Like, as much as I'm sure, Donald respected you and liked you and admired what you did, you had to grow with where the organization was growing. And as you progressed, how did you adjust maybe your professional demeanor or leadership acumen to fit into that new role? And what advice would you give to the listener that's listening on, hey, if I'm going to grow, these are some certain things that you've learned along the way to grow with the organization?
It was really nice that Don hadn't done it before either.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So we
He
both
didn't know what
walk
was
in
wrong,
with
right?
a lot of humility. Like, hey, we're figuring this out, but we're going to respond to all of this in a very human way. And I think that a deep level of empathy and trying to make the best next decision was the posture that we took. And you have to see a couple things happen, a couple problems, one after another, and then you realize, oh, we need to solve that problem. This is an issue. Oh, we didn't even realize that we needed to create a process around that. And so I think it's having your antenna for how you can just solve problems one after another. And in running a small business, there's a bunch of them. And so I loved getting to, here's one of the things that I really found a lot of passion around. I would get to the end of the year and wonder, did I do a good job? Because I don't really need to be managed. I show up like an entrepreneur. I'm going to get my stuff done. Don never had to worry about really giving me a whole lot of direction around, Tim, here's exactly what I need you to be doing. It's like we just kind of riffed off one another. He stayed in his lane, I stayed in mine, and we just kept doubling revenue every year. So it's like, well, this is kind of working, so let's just kind of keep doing more of that. But as you start to have more team members, I realized that the way that I would feel, like, did I do a good job? I mean, I think so, because it seems like everything's moving in the right direction. I realized that's not that sustainable if you want to have a group of people. You need to create like a talent management structure and a process. So what I set out to do is put a little bit more process around being able to answer that for people. Did I do a good job? And I don't think that we should get to the end of the year and now us be operating off of something that feels too subjective. Like, that doesn't feel fair either. So something that we developed is a simple one-pager where we would do quarterly performance reviews. We would have a list of kind of the 5 main priorities that we had all agreed on earlier on in the quarter. And there's a column after each of those priorities, 3 columns, and it's around expectations. Did not meet expectations, met expectations, or exceeded them. So I would have people do a self-review, bring that to the meeting. I'd fill out a version of the form, and then we'd have a conversation. You know, priority one, how did we both score this around expectations? And if they weren't aligned, we got to have a conversation. And so what we learned through that is, okay, the priorities need to be time-bound, measurable, and specific, because I don't think it's fair if I kind of walk in with my opinion, because that can just not set you up for success if it feels like too much ambiguity. So even just little things like performance reviews, we didn't even know that we needed that until we knew that we needed that. And then we went out to solve the problem and we created it. So it's that as an example times about 1,000. And I just got really good at solving problems one after the next. And they're not all bad problems. It's just, not all problems are bad.
Challenges.
It's just what you have to do.
Problems are opportunities.
Yeah.
I mean, we absolutely know that. And I think that's tremendous advice, whether you're listening and you're an entrepreneur or, you know, you're working as a leader or somebody inside of a company, you know, and one of the themes of our company, Tim, is turn the pressure into potential. Like, when you solve problems, you create a great brand. You create value in yourself. And if you're doubling in size every year, man, there's some growing pains. It's like your knees hurt, everything hurts, right? And you got to figure that out. So there's a lot of opportunity to solve a lot of problems. And I'm sure that resonates with a lot of people listening, is like, you know, don't hate on the growth and the challenges and the problems. These are opportunities for us to shine.
I don't know if Daniel Ek is still the CEO of Spotify, but when I heard this quote, but he said, the value of a business is the sum of all problems solved. And if you really think about it, that is the job.
Yes.
For leaders, but also for everybody. A business is solving a problem for a customer. Internally, for leaders, you're often solving problems within your team. The value of a business is the sum of all problems solved. And so fall in love with solving problems. So what's interesting about my time with Don is here I was, COO of StoryBrand, which had evolved in time into Business Made Simple. But for a good majority of that, we're a marketing company helping people clarify their message. I wasn't that passionate about marketing.
I won't tell
But
anybody.
it didn't matter because there's some people, Don loved marketing. Like that lit him up.
Mm-hmm.
What I loved to
Mm-hmm.
do was partner together on helping a vision come to life and then work with the team to get it done. So I loved solving problems. I loved, all the operation and building the team. You could have handed me, hey, Tim, we're not doing StoryBrand anymore. We're going to go start, selling mops.
You're good.
I'm like, cool. Because the goal, it's just like, okay, what's the problem? What strategy are we going to put in place? What are the steps to get there? How do you align a team around, that strategy? That was the joy for me. So I think that actually was why I was able to partner with Don so well is I loved his vision. I loved the things that he was dreaming up. I felt very connected to it on just a fulfillment side. I thought the work that we were doing was making an impact on people. But if
For sure.
he decided that one day we wanted to go start chasing down this other big idea, I'm like, cool, let's go.
do it.
So I think that's
Yeah.
also a part of it is I'm fine to have some flex and to kind of
Yeah.
just pivot.
Well, and you're in your strength zone, so it's less about what are we doing and more about what's my role in that.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think is powerful thing to learn. Self-awareness is the key to growth. It's like know what you're good at and put your attention to those things. Because not only is it like going to bring you success, but here's the great news that I have found anyway, and we talked about this before the show, is not only will you ultimately find success, but even more than that, you find a level of fulfillment. Because it's like, man, this is what just gets my juices flowing.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to get your insight for the listener as it relates to mentoring and what good leadership attributes are. The primary listener here is leaders and entrepreneurs, and I think about your life, and even some of the people we referenced before we hit record that have come into your life. A David Novak, a Donald Miller. I think we can learn a lot from modeling after others that we aspire to be like. You've had some amazing mentors and leaders that have been placed in your life along the way. When you look back on that journey, whether it was at Tom's or Apple or with Don or with David or other mentors, who are some of those leaders and mentors that really have stood out to you? And what was it about them that made them so impactful so that the listener could maybe say, hey, these are some things I need to focus on? Who were some of those people? What were some of those things that just really stood out to you?
David Novak is one of the greatest leaders I'll ever meet. I mean, he's one of the most remarkable human beings. He is a poster child of the secret society of success. And he was the CEO of Yum Brands, which is the parent company of KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut. So David, in his time leading Yum, grew the business from $4 billion to $32 billion in market cap. $4 billion to $32 billion. But what I love is how he did it. David, the number one behavior he drove as a CEO was recognition and valuing every person's contribution. So when they were starting Yum, originally it was under Pepsi. They spun off the restaurant brands. And so David was a co-founder in that. And when they were trying to figure out what's the kind of company that we wanted to build with Yum, they went out and did best practice visits at all the most successful companies. They wanted to study the companies who had been successful year after year, not just these, small spikes, but consistent results year over year. And then they ended up kind of putting all those down on paper, and they codified the learnings. And the number one behavior at the Southwest Airlines, Home Depot, Walmart, at the time GE was, a powerhouse. The number one behavior that each of those companies that they found was a culture where everyone counts. So David knew, a leader casts a shadow. People do what the leader does. So he knew, if I want to build a culture of recognition where people know that they count, I got to go first. So David calls it purposeful recognition, though. Like, identify the behaviors that you know will drive results in your business and recognize the heck out of those. So it could be quality, it could be, whatever it is in whoever's listening, whatever your business is. So, let's just say that David was out visiting a KFC, and he had somebody, a cook that made an amazing original recipe. He'd run out to his car, get a little recognition award, and he'd write a little note of recognition and hand it to this person, and then say, hey, I want to take a picture with you. I'll send you a framed version of the picture, do whatever you want with it, but I'm going to take a picture and put a copy of it on the walls in my office at Yum, because when people walk into the CEO's office at Yum, I want them to see that you're the kind of person who's making stuff happen around here.
Wow. That's awesome.
So David scaled this idea of recognition all over the world. He had 1.5 million employees. And guess what? Recognition works all over the world. We all want to be seen and valued and appreciated. And that has been something that I learned the impact of through David. And when I wrote my book, I didn't know him at the time, or else the chapter that I have on recognition would have included stories from
about him.
So real quick thing. So I ended up writing a story about how Indra Nooyi, who's the former CEO of Pepsi, she would write notes to her employees' parents, thanking them for raising such amazing children. And David one day was like, she got that idea from me. And I'm like, are you serious? So it's funny how even his impact has made its way into that one story. But anyways, it is recognition, valuing everybody's contribution. That is something, like, that is David Novak. And, you'll hear a lot of other leaders talk about that and how influenced that they've been from him. CEOs of Home Depot and so many other places. So it's pretty cool to see.
Man, I can imagine him coming back from these benchmarking trips, and the facilities team is probably like, I wonder how many picture frames he has for us to put up.
You should see.
That's awesome.
I mean, I wish that everybody could see the walls of his office, because he's been retired since 2016. But in Louisville, Kentucky, his office looks exactly as though it did on his last day. And for our nonprofit, David Novak Leadership, a couple times a year we bring everybody together, and often we'll meet up at Yum, and so
you get to see it.
Oh yeah, we are able to walk anybody who's new, joined our team since our last meeting, get to give them a little tour and kind of show them the recognition culture and how they built all that they did.
I often, we talk a lot about recognition in some of our workshops as well. And some of the pushback I get, Tim, is especially from the aggressive style of leader, because aggressive can drive results, but it's usually not sustainable. It's compliance driven, right? And, this, love-hate relationship on recognition, some leaders would say, if I go too heavy with the recognition, I might get taken advantage of. What do you say to the leader with that mindset? How do they counteract not coming off soft or weak or fluffy? How do you pull off high recognition and high accountability?
David says it's the soft stuff that drives the hard results.
Man, I agree.
So
I agree.
Yeah, you might be able to motivate somebody through fear or, but if you actually show somebody that they're appreciated and that you value them, they'll do anything for you.
It's true.
And so will some people get taken advantage of? Maybe. But I think that the way that I want to show up in my life is to open myself up to potentially be taken advantage of doing the thing that I think is the right thing to do.
No question about it.
So I think that's where I net out on that.
Yeah.
I think that there's some people that will take advantage, but those probably aren't the people that you want to have on your team over time. I'm not sure if
Agreed.
that kind of person and that kind of culture is the one that you really want to create. I think I want to create an environment where people are working their tails off, and also we're able to. David, he leads with recognition even today. You know how he the other day. I mean, I could pull up text messages of just the ways that he's encouraging me, but that doesn't mean that I like sit back and hang out. It's like no. I want to make that guy proud. I want to do everything in my power to get more of that recognition. But it does come to, it's got to be purposeful. You have to recognize behaviors that are going to drive the business. It's not just, being kind. Like being kind is important, but it's also the recognition is what are the things that will drive results. Lean into that stuff, And so
kind is like, hey, I love your haircut, which is a nice thing to say.
That's not going to drive
driving
results.
business results.
No.
Yeah,
No.
Right. Well, one of the things I say ad nauseum is this, and this is, I think, the ultimate leadership challenge. Do you want to be a leader that people report to? Or I'm sorry, do you want to be a boss that people report to? Or do you want to be a leader that people don't want to let down? Mm-hmm. Like if you think about the people in your own life, Tim, that you've had some amazing people in your life, these people that you didn't want to let down, they were probably people like David that made so many deposits into who you've become. And when you make those kind of leadership deposits, I think that's when you create engagement over compliance, because they're working hard when you're not around because they don't want to let you down.
Yeah, absolutely. I will take the chance 100 times out of 100.
Yes. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the book. You touched on it a little bit earlier. In reading and understanding the book, and it's very clear, there is a narrative out there. And we talked about the spotlight a little bit earlier, but there is this narrative, I think, that the general population has as far as what success is. Climb the ladder, become the boss, or whatever the version is of whatever pursuit you're running towards. The dangling of the carrot that we're all chasing. And in this book, you challenge the reader to reevaluate what success really is, and maybe even redefine it, and how to go about achieving it. Can you talk to us a little bit about how did you learn this approach? How did this come to you? And what would you say to the listener and challenge them with as it relates to redefining maybe what success really is?
Every chapter in the book, I try to take a different angle on answering the question like success is, right? Like filling in that blank. And so every chapter is like a new way of thinking about it and looking at it. And somebody I've been really inspired by is a woman named Becca Stevens. In 1997, Becca opened a home to get 5 women off the streets. And these women had lived lives of prostitution, drug addiction, and a lot of them had experienced quite a bit of trauma to even get them into that place. So Becca opened this home, and they found that the recovery was going well, but almost when they tried to reintegrate these women back into society, a lot of them had criminal records. It's not just easy to go apply for a job when a background check will show what it shows. Therefore, they're not going to get that job. Therefore, they can't make money. Therefore, they might then want to go back to a thing that they know they can do to make money, which just kind of repeats the cycle over and over again. So they started a brand called Thistle Farms. Thistle Farms, they started making soaps, lotions, candles, and they would sell these products. The women would, work for Thistle Farms, and as a part of this recovery, they're able to make a living, and the sales of these products go back to like funding these recovery programs. So if you in Nashville, Tennessee today go to Thistle Farms, you can get a tour of the production facility. And often it's the women who'd been through the 2-year recovery program that will give you a tour. And so I brought enough friends to Thistle Farms to go on several of these tours and got to know this one woman named Jennifer. So Jennifer tells her story, and it's pretty similar to a lot of these other women's stories who have been through Thistle Farms. But for Jennifer, 18-year heroin addiction, homelessness, rehab, psych wards, She ended up writing a book, and in her memoir, she said, "My life had evolved into an intentional unconsciousness. My life had evolved into an intentional unconsciousness." That's how she wanted it. And one day I was talking with Jennifer, and I said, "Jennifer, where would you be without Becca Stevens in your life?" And she didn't hesitate. She said, "I'd be dead. Without Becca, I'd be dead." And there's this myth, this lie that a lot of us believe, that if we truly want to make an impact, success is having tens of thousands of followers, or being able to stand on a massive stage or platform. But I believe that you don't need a stage to make an impact. And in fact, success is one life at a time. That's not to say that by taking that approach, you one day won't have a major impact in the lives of a lot of people. I mean, today, Thistle Farms has 600 beds across the Thistle Farm network where they're able to welcome women in for a free 2-year recovery program to help them get off the streets.
Wow.
They've helped thousands of women recover, but they didn't get there by trying to get there. They got there one life at a time. Multiply that times almost 30 years now, and this is what can happen. So I think for each of us, I don't know the kind of impact that you will have, but I just want to believe that there is one person in your life right now that comes to mind that you can have an impact on. What if you start there?
Wow. It's this feeling of like, I want people to be glad that I was here and sad that I'm gone. And that doesn't mean a trophy or a best, New York Times bestseller. Like, if those things happen, let's chase them.
Sure.
Let's go make big impact. But man, I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about specifically somebody that is facing substance abuse. And I'm thinking to myself, like literally as you're telling the story, how many people are going to give testimony with my name in it? How many people, when I'm called from this earth, are going to say, if it wasn't for Jeff Hancher, I don't know if fill in the blank. Because one thing that you really highlight in this book, and Tim, let me say, like, the world needs more people like you. And this book is a must read. One of the things that you say in the book is contribute to people without minding or caring who gets the credit. Like, that's what this lady did.
Yeah.
Because it was her passion. But can you unpack this a little bit more? Because look, I'm in agreement, but I'm going to be very vulnerable and transparent and say that's not always easy to do.
No.
Because so often, especially in business, we find ourselves, it's not because we're monsters or bad people, but we might act a certain way because I know if I make this connection or act this kind of way, we might be able to hit that key performance indicator or hit that quarterly goal. Or if I say this to that person, they can introduce me to that one and that'll open a door. Like, there's sometimes these ulterior motives that we don't even try to create. Like, what are your thoughts around that? How do we intentionally go about that one thing?
I have so many thoughts. There's this one quote, Zig Ziglar. It's a very famous quote. He's like, help enough people get what they want, and eventually you'll get what you want.
Isn't there a chasm there?
I like the start of that quote. Help people get what they want. What gets dangerous is when there's something on the other side of the equal sign. Eventually you'll get what you want. I'm here to tell you that is not guaranteed, and I feel like if that is your aim, you better be very, very careful, because I think you are heading into some very dangerous water. If everything that you do is reciprocal or contingent on somebody else then doing something back for you, I wonder if your heart and your posture is even in the right place. That's not to say that those things can't happen, but I think that you need to check yourself. Are you actually trying to help? Or is this actually all very selfish?
Right.
And I think
that's a dagger.
And I am saying that to myself.
Same.
Right? So
Same.
what I have learned is there are two paths, and this is actually opposite ends of the spectrum. I talk about in the book this idea of the spotlight mindset, this unhealthy desire for attention and recognition, right? It's the person who, on a really unhealthy day, is only doing something to get something in return. That is that end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is what I call living in the way of the secret society. That is a help others win, serve others. There is nothing on the other side of the equal sign. It is just show up to serve and be helpful. And that is success. The reality is we live in a tension between those two things. And every day, in this exact moment right now, I have to make a decision. Am I showing up to get something, or am I content showing up to just be helpful, right? Like, do I show up on podcasts so that people listen and maybe want to buy a book? It's like, sure. But I also feel like the reason why I do this is there is a passion for me in this message. And whether people remember my name or not, I hope that what I am able to offer is the beginning of a conversation that they start to seriously consider, what is success in my life? And if then that is able to point back to some of the work that I've been able to do, I hope that I just have a very humble, egoless perspective and just say, I am grateful to have been a part of that. But I really hope that it's more about me not caring about who gets the credit, right? And there is, I'm going to turn around to grab something. So for if anybody is listening to this or watching this on video, you'll see this. But there is this plaque that sat on Ronald Reagan's desk when he was president, and I got a replica of the same plaque. There is no limit to what a man can do or where he can go if he doesn't mind who gets the credit.
There it is.
And to me, that is the North Star for how I want to show up. Do I do that every day? No. But I really do try to take steps towards health, which is that serve others, don't mind who gets the credit, stepping towards the way of the secret society and away from the spotlight mindset.
Man, that's a challenge. That's a challenge to us. That's a challenge to me. I'd love to think I'm a good guy. I'd love to think that I love serving people. It's what I do for a living. But I will tell you, I hope that challenges the listener too. Everybody listening, is this cause and effect? If I do this, I'll get this. Or do we truly just show up to serve people? Because I really feel like if we do that, the environment literally can change. I wonder if sometimes we're even holding ourselves back from ultimate impact because of this cause and effect mentality of, if I act this way or do this, this is what's in it for me. I've come to find too, Tim, in my journey that genuine is hard to fake. It's very hard to fake. You know a fake when you're around it. You know authentic when you're around it. But I think this is a healthy challenge, because I don't think, and this isn't like if you're convicted by this listening that you're a monster or you're a bad person, but I think it's a real healthy challenge for us, especially in leadership. Not to just drive a number or drive an income statement or EBITDA or whatever it might be, but to really focus on how do we make the best out of people? How do we make sure that every person we're privileged to lead reaches their fullest potential? What does that mean? And I think it's a great challenge in the book. Tim, I want to ask you, because not only are you a great leader, not only have you been around leaders, but you've made it your mission to support leaders. The work that you're doing with David and the profound impact you're having on leaders. What is the biggest leadership challenge you're seeing today? What is the biggest challenge that you see leaders are having?
I think for a lot of leaders, specifically when it comes to their own development, how they grow, the biggest challenge that leaders are up against is time. They don't feel like they have the time to invest in themselves, to learn, to get better. And, David always says, if you want to grow a business, solve the biggest problem that occurs most frequently for your customers. So when he's at Yum, Taco Bell, 70% of their business was happening through the drive-thru. And yet their customers were saying that the products were too messy. So they created more portable products. And guess what happened to the revenue? It increased because they solved the biggest problem that occurs most frequently. And so our whole mission with David Novak Leadership and our podcast, How Leaders Lead, is make the world a better place by developing better leaders. So I think there's a lot of leaders that want to get better. And yet, when they look at their schedules, they just feel totally maxed out. And so we have made an attempt to solve the biggest problem that occurs most frequently. So we launched earlier this year an iPhone app called How Leaders Lead. It's available in the App Store for free. We take the podcast interviews that we do and cut it up into under 2 minutes, the leadership insights. And so there's a daily video. It's almost like a leadership devo. Open the app, the first thing that you do, watch a video, maybe it's 1 to 2 minutes, and it's just like a little nugget on leadership that can help you. Here's an example of a video that we posted recently. It was with Carol Tomei, the CEO of UPS. So Carol talks about how she does something called war gaming with her team, her executive leader. She says, put on the persona of a competitor of UPS and attack us. And then they come back and present the plans, the strategies that a competitor might use to take down UPS. And then she says, put back on your UPS hat and fight against the attack, right? So it's a 45-second video that then just gives you something to think about as a leader that can make an impact in your business. And so we have had everybody from Tom Brady, Condoleezza Rice, people like Carol Tomei, Eric Church, the country music artist, was just on recently, Steve Squeri of American Express. I mean, every week we're hosting a conversation like this, and then we turn around and put that content into our app. So leaders really do struggle to learn and, inspire themselves to go out and be better leaders. And so we're trying to serve up content to them to allow them to keep making progress while also being mindful of, the limitations of their time. And we hope that then they want to turn around and listen to a full episode. Oh, I love that, Carol Tomei clip. Let me go listen to the full interview. And, we make it easy to do that. But just watch the leadership, the daily video. And I swear you are going to, be better. And we've even had teams that are committing to doing this with one another. They say, okay, hey, let's do this for the next 2 weeks. Everybody download the app, watch the video, and then let's jump on Zoom for 30 or 60 minutes and just talk about, what are the videos that are making a big difference, kind of shaping our thinking. And then you create conversation, and it's been really cool to see all the ways that the app is being used. But that's a big challenge that we saw for leaders that we're trying to solve.
Oh man, time. It is a precious commodity. What's the name of the app again?
How Leaders Lead.
How Leaders Lead.
Yeah.
This, it's funny you say this because just yesterday I had somebody come through the website, inquiring about one of our executive mastermind groups. I get on a discovery call. They ask me when is the call. I give them the time and when it happens, and they said, that's not going to work. I was hoping it was in the evenings. There's just no way that I could ever make that work. My schedule is absolutely crazy. So here I am thinking about the drive-through, do I need to make a different package? What does that look like? But here we are again, this other piece of, I don't have time to invest in myself. And what if you don't, though? That leads to what? It leads to burnout. It leads to resenting success, all of these things. One of my most favorite quotes, Tim, is from Abraham Lincoln when he said, if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend 4 hours sharpening the axe. So much in today's world moves so fast that instead of using the sharpening stone, we just keep wailing on the tree with a dull blade. And it's just so fast paced. So I love what you're saying, which is like, all right, we're going to give it to you in chunks. But I think we also have to challenge the leader to say, are you taking time or are you investing time? Because there is a difference in those two things. But I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
Time is a huge challenge.
Yeah. Another thing, too, that I find with leaders is they're focused on the wrong things. And here's what I mean by that. I heard a guy named Andy Stanley speak at an event in Atlanta in 2017. And the event was around finding your purpose. And Andy's talking to this group of leaders, and he's saying, when people are thinking about the big picture, trying to find their purpose, they're often asking, why am I here? Which actually feels like a pretty good question, in that kind of an exercise.
Yeah.
But he says it's the wrong question. He says the question you need to ask is, who am I here for?
Wow.
And what I love
That's
is
profound.
who am I here for still requires you to bring your unique gifts, your skill set, your experience. You bring that to the table. But it puts you in the headspace of helping somebody else. Leaders today are focused on the wrong things. It's easy for us to think, why am I here, when we need to be asking, who am I here for? The people that are inspiring in the secret society for me are the ones who help others win. This is somebody who shows up with their antenna up for how they are serving the people around them. And I needed this reminder so much so that I created an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper after I got home from this conference. And I put the pictures and the names of every single person on my team and their families. Because I'm sure you've had these days where your calendar, like all the colors are touching, right? It feels like we have no time. Those are the days with an endless inbox. I can't even keep up with that. I wanted to beeline it to my desk, close my door, get my stuff done. But those are the days when maybe I'd keep the door open because I just would remember, who am I here for? What if I needed to just make sure I always have my antenna up for the people on my team, how they're showing up, what they might be going through? And that's not to say that there aren't times that you do need to get your stuff done, but it's we need to find a balance here. Leadership is not about everybody serving us. It's opening ourselves up to serve more people. That's why I love the Home Depot org chart, because they flip the pyramid on its head. The point is at the bottom, and you have the CEO at the bottom of the org chart, the point of the triangle, and the V heading up in the direction that the CEO is in support of everybody else. It's not everybody else laddering up to the CEO, it's the CEO supporting everyone. If more of us took that posture of, we are here to serve the next person, I think that for me is what makes the biggest difference. And, last thing I'll say on this is, there's this quote that I love from a guy named Albert Schweitzer. And it's this North Star for me. And he says, I don't know what your destiny will be. Some of you will occupy remarkable positions. Perhaps some of you will become famous by your pens or as artists. But I know one thing. The only ones among you who will be really happy are those who have sought and found how to serve. The challenge for leaders is that I want to show up like that, and it is hard.
It is so hard. And I don't even know if it can be taught, as far as that, because that's a heart condition, truly. That transcends all the things that we're talking about. But what a profound statement. And I absolutely agree. I say to leaders often, Tim, if you don't truly have a passion for serving people, get out of leadership. And that doesn't make you a bad person. It just doesn't make you qualified to lead. You can do it, but nobody's going to have any fun. You're not going to enjoy it. The people you're leading aren't going to enjoy it. Maybe that's not what you're called to do. Authentically and genuinely loving and wanting to see people reach their potential, I think that's the bedrock of a great leadership.
I want to challenge one
No
idea.
doubt.
I think people can learn it. I do.
Learn to
They
care.
can. And I think that the way that it happens is you take one step. Don't
Yeah.
feel bad about yourself, about where you are. Define reality of where you are. You might be on the far end of the spectrum. You might be in the spotlight mindset. Well, guess what?
Truth.
You can take one step in the other direction. And if you continue to make that a habit, you will learn to do this.
And you are somebody that's living that out, right? I mean, you mentioned earlier, like, hey, I had the hair. I was ready to find the big stage.
That's right.
I was ready, but maybe was chasing the wrong things. And
Might take you
I
15 years like I did, but hey,
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you, we can learn this
But
stuff.
think of the impact. I mean, the impact of some of the people now that you're working with, and then some of the people you've had to serve. And let's not lose sight of this story that Tim told about, this lady that was helping people recover from substance abuse. When you said her name, I'm here to tell you, I never have heard of her name ever. That
Most
was the
probably
first
haven't.
time.
Yeah.
And most probably
But yeah,
haven't.
most probably haven't. Yeah, yeah. That's right.
But those people, they know her and will never forget her.
That's right.
And that, my friend, is
Yeah.
success.
And I think that what's great
That's
about
amazing.
Becca Stevens is I think she too would say, I don't care if you know my name.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
I only care about what Jennifer, how she
Yeah.
has made progress in her life, And I
Man,
just,
it's beautiful.
I love that.
It's beautiful. Well, I mean, look, more people need to read the book. There's no question about that. And I love the heart behind the book because it's truly one that serves people. And Tim, I know you're a humble guy, but you're living this out. I truly do believe, based off of all the interviews that I've watched you in, getting to understand your book, the level of success doesn't come by luck or happenstance. You are that leader. And I value that very, very much. And I value your time. Being a CEO, there's a lot going on. And so I value, is there a question I should have asked that I didn't ask? Is there something you want the listeners to know that we didn't talk about?
One thing that I know we did talk about this earlier, but I always love giving people very tangible ways to apply some of this. Every time I speak for companies or wherever I am, I always do a bit on recognition. And I ask, who could use a shout out? Like, who's somebody that you could take the next 2 minutes and write a message to just let them know how much you appreciate them, a way that they're showing up in your life that may have otherwise gone unnoticed. And I start a 2-minute timer and I say, hey, I'm going to be on my phone as well, send in a text. And then what happens is we go around and start sharing some of the texts that people write. And guess what happens? By the end of the event, people are getting responses back. So I would say, as soon as you're done listening to this episode, just hit pause, pull out your phone, and send a message to let somebody know how much they matter in your life. It could be a colleague, family member, friend, because we all need a little recognition to feel valued. And I feel like if we were to do that, show up and build company cultures where everyone knows that they count, I think that for us as a leader is also us taking a step in the right direction. And I think if we can do that today, I think that we're on the right path.
Man, the gratitude and the feeling of the person receiving that text too. And look, I want to throw the accountability out to that because I love that exercise, Tim. If you do that, you send that text out to somebody, they text you back. You don't even have to give me their name. Shoot us an email, info@jeffhancher. Maybe throw it up in a story and tag us. I'll pick 5 people. We're recording this July 12th. Let's just say July 20, or we'll say August 15th, because I don't know when it's coming out, but it'll be out before then. August 15th of 2024. Either email us that you did it and some of the feedback, or put it up in your Instagram story and tag us. We'll pick 5 people, and we're going to send you a copy of Tim's book.
I love it.
If you don't already have it, we're going to send that book out because I'm a believer in this recognition. You know what we're going to hear, Tim, when people do this? Not only how much it meant to the people they texted, but how it made them feel.
Oh, yeah. Some of my favorite moments are when I'm at an event and I call on somebody to read what they wrote, and they had just texted somebody in the room. Like, people will be crying doing this.
Wow.
I've started crying.
I'm going to take this one, Tim. I'm taking this one.
Oh, my gosh. Like, people need
doing this.
People need more recognition. And
Totally.
we are in a recognition deficit. You got a lot of people leaving their jobs. There's 2 reasons why people leave their jobs. They don't feel appreciated, or they don't like their boss. Those are usually why people transition, right? Well, guess what happens if you start recognizing people, showing them that you care? Well, they're probably going to like you, and they're going to feel appreciated. So it's like, boom, boom. You're probably going to increase retention simply by recognizing people and letting them know that you see them. It's so powerful.
Yes.
And I had a friend of mine. I know we're trying to land the plane here, but I just love this so much. So my friend John Acuff, he says, if you want to have a kind 16-year-old, teach them kindness when they're 6 and give them 10 years to practice. So recognition has been such a really important part of my life. And I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and we teach our kids recognition. And it starts with even, this happens almost every day. It's like, hey, Mom, thanks for making us this yummy food. We were at Chipotle not too long ago, and my son said, hey, Dad, I really like that woman's shirt. And I was like, you should go tell her. So here he is, walks across the restaurant. I see him, tap this lady on the shoulder, and she turns around, and I see him telling her this. Her face lit up like a Christmas tree. And then he walked back to me. He's got a big smile on his face. So I want him and my daughter, I want them to recognize people. And it might start with recognizing and telling somebody you like their shirt. But in time, you'll see how that will mature, right? And the same is true for all of us. Like, if we can learn to recognize people, I just feel like it could be the beginning of some really amazing, really fruitful stuff.
These are the great deposits that earn us the right to make the withdrawals that we need as leaders. And I absolutely love it. Tim, you are a breath of fresh air, my friend. Love it. I hope everybody listening gets the book. I really appreciate you joining us today. I love your story. It's an amazing story. It's inspiring. It's going to give a lot of people this courage to just keep going and keep trying. And thank you for providing this gift of this book, The Secret Society of Success. I think it's one that it can literally transform how people think, because I think people feel a lot of pressure to be defined by what they do and who they are. And I think the who they are outweighs the what you do and what you win and the accolade, but who you serve. And I think it's a gift, Tim. So we appreciate you, man.
My pleasure.
And hopefully the next book that you write, you'll agree to come back on and tell us more about it, and we'll talk more about that one too.
I love it. Deal. Thank you so much for having me.
Right.
Grateful for the chance to just talk about these ideas, because I think if we all would just show up and learn to live in the way of the secret society, be people who are viewing success as one life at a time. We're recognizing people. We're not minding who gets the credit. If we show up more like that, I can't guarantee results, but I just believe that is us on a much, much better path. That is the way towards meaning, and I think it's the way towards healthier companies, healthier families, healthier personal lives, all of that, simply by just learning to help others win and show up in that way. So grateful for the chance to be able to talk about this.
Well said. Well said. Tim Schurrer, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed this discussion as much as I did. Make sure you sign up to get the show notes. We're going to have links to the book on the show notes. We're going to recap this conversation for you. You want those show notes emailed to you every single week right in your inbox. Go to our homepage at jeffhancher.com. Make sure to get signed up for those. Until next week, keep redefining success and keep turning your own pressure